Coach Corey Wayne, and this is my video coaching newsletter. And the topic of today's newsletter is going to be distant and disrespectful girlfriend. Well, I've got an email that I'm going to go through with you today, and this particular email is an update to a video newsletter, a success story that I did around August, September, I think, of last year. So this is probably, at this particular time, about 7-8 months ago. So he gives an update, and after I did that previous newsletter, and if you're also on my website watching this particular video, there'll be a link below so you can actually go and see his original success story. So he's been dating this girl, and after the previous video newsletter I did for him, he says right at 5 weeks she asked him to be exclusive, and right at 7 weeks that's when she told him she was in love with him. And if you follow the progression in my book, typically the 7th week is when a woman falls in love with you. And so fast forward 4 or 5 months later, because this particular email is probably from a couple of months ago when he sent his latest update in, he noticed that she was backing away and started to become cold and distant. He's 35, I think she's 37. And he says what happened was after her lease ended, she ended up moving back with her parents. And ever since she started living with her parents again, her behavior seemed to be off and her interests seemed to be dropping. And he was thinking, I'm following what you're teaching. Do you have any idea what the hell could be going on? He says he's read the book 20 times, which is great. But there's a couple little things that you'll see I'll point out as I go through his email that kind of give clues as to potentially what part of the problem is. So I have a quote that are in this particular guy, he's a recovering nice guy. And so what he said before was that whenever he started dating a woman he liked, he always would turn into a spineless jellyfish, and obviously it would never end well after that. So you got to keep that in mind, because like I talk about in my book, there's pickup skills, there's dating skills, and there's relationship skills that you need to learn. And so this particular video is going to deal a lot with relationship type of skills. And so guys that tend to shortcut things and don't learn the book well enough or don't think that it's important, this is where they tend to get themselves into trouble. So I got a quote that I wrote on this topic, and then we're going to go through his email. And so the quote says, "If a woman does not respect you or she loses respect for you, she will treat you in ways that show she does not value what you have to offer, won't appreciate you, and won't feel love for you. Men who are spineless and don't stand up for themselves unknowingly invite women to treat them like doormats and with small instances of disrespect. The more a man allows a woman to disrespect and jerk him around without standing up for himself, the greater her acts of disrespect will become until she starts ignoring him and blowing him off. In healthy relationships, both men and women must set boundaries of acceptable behavior and respect. The only way a woman will love a man fully and completely is if she knows that if she pushes him too far, he will walk and never look back." Now, that doesn't mean you threaten to end a relationship, but the idea is the first time you spot an instance of disrespect, or a woman tells you she's going to do something and then she doesn't, you got to call her out on it in a loving way to say, "Hey, you told me you were going to do this, or you said you were going to do that and you didn't. Well, what's up with that?" But if little things like that happen and you don't, that's just not a big deal, and you just let it slide, that's one little instance of you allowing her to get away with something that's just rude and disrespectful. And when women sense weakness in a guy, they're going to test him. You're going to look for that chink in the armor. And the more you allow them to slide, because remember, this particular dude, he's a recovering nice guy. And so he's further on down the line with a woman than he's ever been with somebody that he really loves and cares about. And so his emotions, I wrote about this extensively in my book, how hard it was for me to deal with this the first time I was in a relationship with a woman that just knocked my socks off. And when you really care about somebody, there's a lot of downside to potentially losing that person, because when you lose somebody that you're in love with and who's in love with you, those take a lot longer to get over than somebody that may have just been a fuck buddy or somebody that you were casually hooking up with. So there's a lot more to lose, and a lot of guys tend to be extra nice in those situations And they put up with these they start out as little subtle things. And if you pass the test, not a big deal. But if you just keep letting shit slide and you don't stand up for yourself and you don't speak out, what ends up happening is you get blown off. And this is what one of the things that happened was she was supposed to pick him up at the airport and she just didn't show. She just totally stood him up. He called her out on it and it completely changed her behavior, and things seem to be back to normal now, but he's thinking, what's going on here? Obviously something is off. So let's go through his email. He says, "Hi Corey, my name is Bob and I'm a 35-year-old formerly single guy in California." I say formerly, and so the name of the video newsletter that I did, for those of you maybe just watching this on YouTube, if you Google Corey Wayne, her curiosity and interest soared. That is the title. So if you want to go back and see where he was 8 months ago versus where he is now, you're more welcome to do it. I encourage you to do that so you can see the progression. I say formerly single because thanks to reading your book 20 plus times, I am now in an exclusive relationship with a really awesome woman. Now keep in mind, this is the woman that stood him up at the airport. So what does that tell me? He's kind of blinded by the fact that he's got a really high level of attraction. Obviously he's in love with this girl. He cares about her a lot. She's 37, athletic, attractive, never married, and has no kids. I had written you a few months ago to tell you how great things were going in the initial stages of dating, thanks to your guidance of hanging back a bit and letting her come to me. It worked so well, it was shocking. After 5 weeks, she asked me to be exclusive, and after 7 weeks, she told me she loved me. Again, that's textbook. It seems like he was doing everything right in the beginning, which was the opposite of what he'd always done in the past that led to his getting rejected. So it's like the first time he's in a relationship with the kind of woman he feels like, this is the caliber of woman I always felt that I deserve. And it's a lot harder to do the right thing, especially if you're like I once was, a recovering nice guy, where you're a pleaser, you put up with shit thinking, hey, I got to be extra nice so she'll like me. It was incredible. I've never had an experience like this before, and all I had to do was chill out, have a good time, and not crawl up her back like the old me used to do. Following your advice has given me such an improved sense of self, which has carried over into all aspects of my life. I've been applying another aspect of your teachings as she and I have progressed past the initial dating stage into the relationship stage, and that technique, remember, when you know the fundamentals inside and out, it's not about techniques, it's about understanding the principles that are in the book and acting accordingly, not about being a robot. And that technique is keeping my eye on her interest level. Well, a big part of it when you're in the relationship phase is you have to be able to communicate with a woman effectively. I actually did a video many years ago called How to Communicate with Women Effectively, and that's critically important. And if you don't take the time, because a lot of guys hear little things when they're talking to a woman, and you're going to see here in a minute as I'm going through his email, there's something that's like he just kind of glosses over and doesn't think like it's a big deal, but based on her behavior, that shows me that it's a huge deal. Corey, I'm sad to say, but I see her interest level slipping, and I'm reaching out to you for help to possibly stall this backslide before it turns into something big. When we first met in July, Jessica was living in her own rented house. The relationship was progressing nicely, and she brought up moving in with me. So keep in mind, when a woman expresses something like that, that's what she feels in the moment. And it only applies in that moment. And if she's not saying those things now, then that means she's not feeling those things now. A lot of guys think, well, she told me a year ago she was in love with me and wanted to have my baby, and she's not returning my phone calls. I know she loves me and cares about me. That's what guys tell themselves. No, she was in love with you. It was a real joy watching her attraction level and commitment rise. However, 3 months into the relationship, her landlord decided to rent the house to a family member rather than renewing her lease. My girlfriend moved back in with her parents. So she's 37 years old and moves back in with her parents. Does she have financial problems? Did did she lose her job? I mean, it's like, why would she not, why wouldn't she just get another place? He says that's when things started to go sideways. Now keep in mind, she was talking about moving in with him. So at one point, she felt in love with him enough to where she really wanted to move in with him. So something changed. An important part of communicating with a woman is asking questions. Her behavior has been inconsistent since moving. Well, one thing I want to, he doesn't mention here, but are you nice to her parents? Do her parents like you? Because if mom and dad don't like you and she's living at home and they're constantly chirping in her ear, that can cause a woman to have pause. Has your behavior changed? Are you different just because she lives with mom and dad? She runs hot and cold, and on the cold days, she expresses frustration with work. And this is where it's important when you're having dinner or you're together at your place or you're out having fun together. Well, how was your day? And she says, oh, it was terrible. Well, tell me about it. What was so bad about it? Oh, well, so-and-so was doing this and oh, really? What else? Tell me more. Don't leave anything out. Again, I go through that in detail and how to communicate with women effectively, and it's also in the book. And for the guy that wrote the email, I highly encourage you to go back through the communication skills that are in the book. However, there are some aspects of her behavior that are consistent, and these are clear indications of a dropping interest level. The I love yous have stopped. She contacts me less often. She has expressed doubts of wanting to move in with me, and she is failing to follow through on promises. So notice what he just said to me. She has expressed doubts of wanting to move in with me, but he doesn't elaborate. What does that tell me? Why is she, what doubts? If a woman says to you, I'm having doubts about moving in with you, really, honey, well, what's caused you to change your mind? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? Tell me what's in your heart. An average guy is going to hear that and go, oh, it's not a big deal. I'll get this turned around. I'll just back off a little bit more. But what you really need to do is she's basically saying, hey, I don't feel the same way I once did, and that bothers me, and therefore I don't feel safe and comfortable enough to move in with you. That's what she's trying to communicate. If you just gloss over that and act like it's not a big deal, you'll just use another technique and that'll solve that. That's a big fucking no-no. Because then remember, when a woman feels heard and understood, the legs open. When she doesn't, the legs close. So that tells me that you may not have been communicating with her properly. And she's failing to follow through on promises. So it sounds like on multiple things she's failing to follow through. And this is part of we're standing up for yourself. Remember, this guy referred to himself as a spineless jellyfish in the past. So what that tells me is that he noticed her not following through on certain promises, but he let it slide because he figured, hey, things are going really well. He doesn't want to rock the boat. It's really not that big of a deal. But when you let little things like that, that's a test of your strength. And you let that shit slide, and then she does it again and again. And then women tend to become bolder and more disrespectful the more you allow that shit to slide. Last week, she was supposed to pick me up at the airport, but she left me hanging. That's definitely not fucking cool. Those are the actions of a woman who has zero respect for you, and that's not something a woman who's in love with you would do. That's a woman who just doesn't give a shit anymore. More than likely because little things that you blew off and thought were innocuous, just like you said, not following through on promises. So there were obviously multiple instances of her not following through, and you didn't call her out on it. That's a big part of the problem. So therefore, she started losing respect for you. And when a woman loses respect for you, she starts to fall out of love. If you're dating a woman and she hasn't fallen in love with you yet, and these little things of disrespect happen, and you don't call her out on it, and you just let that shit slide, she'll never fall in love with a guy that she doesn't respect. I discussed that in my book. If a woman truly loved and missed her boyfriend, she would be waiting at the gate, wouldn't you think? Absolutely. I'd call her and say, hey, where are you? I'm here. And she doesn't answer, she blows you off. Are you okay? Did you get in an accident? And if she calls you like a day later, you're like, and she tells you, oh, I overslept, you're like, I'm sorry, but that's bullshit. I was waiting at the airport. You promised me you were going to pick me up. And I don't hear from you until a day later. That's not acceptable behavior. And you better have a good reason for that. Get her to explain it. That's not acceptable. I mean, just blowing you off at the airport, that's a major red fucking flag. That's what happens. Those little instances of her not keeping her promises, you let her get away with it. She's no longer saying, I love you. She blows you off. What does that mean? You're not that important to her at this point in time. The night I got back in town, I told her that I saw a distance growing between us. So this is where he does the right thing and he actually finally stands up for himself. And you'll notice the effect that it has on her behavior. I told her that leaving me hanging at the airport wasn't right. I described to her the kind of relationship that I wanted. This is great. This is what you should do. One where each partner has each other's back and makes them a priority. And if she had different expectations, she needed to let me know right away. That's perfect. That's beautiful. Good fucking job. That's what you should do. But it shouldn't have taken this long to get to the point where she blows you off and just leaves you hanging at the fucking airport. That's not cool. That's the result of you letting her get away with little things here and there and just thinking, oh, it's not a big deal. Like if she says she's going to make you dinner, tells you all the things she's going to buy, and cook this great meal, and then you go and pick her up. She says, it's just a busy week. I never made it to the store. Let's just go out and eat. He's like, well, wait a minute. You said you're going to cook me this great meal. It's like, get your little ass to the car, grab your list, and we'll go to the store and we'll buy everything. We'll make the dinner together. It's holding her accountable. Instead of just saying, oh, okay, yeah, well, let's go have some Italian, or let's go have some sushi, or let's go have some Mexican food. You might think that that's not a big deal, but the point being is that she promised you a great, awesome meal. If she loves you and she cares about you, and she's a normal woman and not a fucking Fruit Loop, when you call her out on it, and you say, well, let's go buy all the stuff and we'll cook together. And she says, oh, I just don't feel like I'm tired. I was like, well, you've been bragging all week about how you're going to fix me this meal. And quite frankly, I think it's kind of rude and disrespectful for me to come over here and you told me all the stuff you're going to do and then you don't do anything. What's up with that? I wouldn't do that to you. That's like saying, hey, I'm going to take you away for the weekend, and then you get all your bags packed and go, you know what? Let's just go to Mickey D's and have a Big Mac attack. She's going to be upset because she told all of her girlfriends that you were taking her away. She packed her bags. She went out and bought a dress. She got her hair done. She got her nails done. She's going to be a little upset, and she's going to let you know about it. It's a two-way street. You can't just let shit slide. She acknowledged what I said, apologized, and told me that she would make it right. She told me she has never known a man who speaks so directly and knows exactly what he wants out of life. Then she initiated sex. Complete attitude change. But it shouldn't have gotten to the point where she blows you off. That's a no-no, dude. This wasn't the first time she's gotten all hot and bothered when I stood up to her about something. Anyway, she came to visit me 2 days later, and she was a completely changed woman. She was super affectionate and loving, and I've been hearing from her every day since. Because you called her out on her bullshit. You said, this is not acceptable. And you let her know you weren't threatening the end of the relationship. You're just saying, hey, this is what I expect. This is what I signed up for, and what you're offering is completely different. And if you're not willing to offer me what I was expecting and what we've agreed, I need to know right now. Remember, women have to know that if they push you too far, you will walk and never fucking look back. Ever. It doesn't mean you threaten him at the end of the relationship, but he did it in a very cordial way. He was very smooth about how he presented it to her. I seem to have my old girlfriend back, and that makes me happy. I think it would be foolish to blindly assume that everything is fine or to not reflect on what caused this drop in interest level in the first place. Well, one of two things. Either she's mentally unstable or a fucking complete Fruit Loop and a nut, or This is because of many months of you just letting little things slide here and there. But again, it's just still relatively new type of relationship. You know, it's only been 4 or 5 months. Remember, people can hide who they are for the first 90 days of a relationship. I had a woman that I dated for, it wasn't about 4 or 5 months into the relationship, and I found out that she was on antidepressants. I didn't know about it. I didn't think it was, okay, thanks for telling me. And then she also said, oh, by the way, I stopped taking them a few days ago. Okay. Well, within 2 weeks, her behavior fucking completely changed. She went from being sweet and loving, willing to communicate and talk, to everything was, I don't want to talk about it. She was bitchy. I mean, it was like Jekyll and Hyde. It was like, what happened to my girlfriend? I mean, that stuff, it affects your brain chemistry. And so when somebody goes off something like that, they go off their meds, if you will, it's like, it's not going to end well. This is why you date for a couple of years before you ever decide to get married. He says, my logical male mind wants to say that it's her moving back in with her family that has affected our relationship. It's possible, but I would say it's little things of disrespect along the way that you've just allowed her to get away with without calling her out on it. But how many women live stressful lives and are still crazy about their partners? Well, and the other thing I would say is that you're not communicating with her properly. You're not opening her up. You're not getting her to talk about what's going on. It's like you hear little things here and there, and then you're thinking, what technique can I use to get her to fall back in love with me? If you're not able to open her up by communicating effectively, this is the kind of behavior you're going to get. Communicating and being able to communicate to a woman that you heard her, you were actually listening by repeating some of it back to her every so often when she's explaining these things and waiting until she gets to the point where she goes, I feel so much better. I'm so glad we talked. And then she jumps in your lap and you make mad, crazy, passionate love. In a relationship, you should be her source of strength. You should be her rock, her mountain. The guy that she shares all of her hopes, her dreams, her fears, her problems with. And healthy, normal women, when you apply the things I talk about communication-wise, they'll be happy, they'll be elated that you understand them and are willing to open them up. Women that are Fruit Loops will just go, I don't want to talk about it, or they'll avoid it, or whenever there's a problem, they'll just ignore you for a few days and stew about it, and then come back later. If you're involved with a woman like that, and she refuses to communicate, it's just a matter of time before things just blow up and spiral out of control. The idea is the stuff that I teach works as long as the woman is normal and healthy and not a fucking nut job. I've reflected on my behavior to see if there is anything I did to turn her off, and the only flaw I can spot in my game is that part of me thinks I'm being a bit of a cold fish by not initiating contact more often than once a week text or call that I make. That's fine, dude. You shouldn't have to do any more than that. However, I also don't want to run the risk of coming on too strong and chasing her off. So again, this guy's all focused on techniques. How much I call, how much I don't call. He's not focused on communication, not focused on standing up for himself, things that I've basically pointed out. Besides hanging back, what got me here in the first place, or he says, besides, hanging back is what got me here in the first place. So that tells me he's focused on techniques only. You got to be her rock. You got to be her mountain. There's a 10 disciplines of love that are in the back of the book. You definitely should review those as well. And from your email here, everything you're doing is, oh, well, she's cold, so let me just back off and be cold. That's fine when you're dating, but not when you're in love with somebody. You've got to be able to open her up. She doesn't feel heard. She doesn't feel understood. That's why she's treating you this way. And on top of that, you've had many instances where you haven't stood up for yourself. What happened, dear Corey? Do you see anything here that I need to work on? Well, like I said, communication obviously is definitely an issue. It doesn't sound like when she shares things that you're getting to the bottom of them and resolving them. You're just brushing it under the rug or thinking, okay, well, I'm going to back off. I'm going to pursue a little more. That's only going to get you so far. You have to communicate, and you also have to stand up for yourself consistently. Because women are always testing your strength. That's how they help you become a better man is by passing those tests. And when you pass those little tests with flying colors, the tests are easy to spot. You can see them coming, and they're easy to pass, and it doesn't create a problem. But if you just keep falling down one after another and you're not opening her up, this is what happens. And if you don't get this turned around, if you don't communicate effectively, it will lead to the end. This relationship will end because she won't feel like you understand her, or you don't get her. So if you'd like to get my help personally, go to my website, click the products tab at the top of your screen on any page, and just follow the instructions for booking whichever option works best for you. And I will talk to you soon.